Is the government about to betray the spirit of Brexit? Well, that's the accusation of leading Brexiteers such as Jacob Rees-Mogg amid reports that ministers are planning to realign the UK with some EU regulations in exchange for a deal on defence and security and on food importations. Now, this comes ahead of the first joint UK-EU summit due to be held in London next month, with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, looking to reset Britain's relationship with the European bloc 8 years after we supposedly Brexited. Well, I'm joined now by the former Deputy Leader of Reform UK and Brexit Party MEP, the god dog of Brexit, Ben Habib. Ben, welcome to the show. I saw the story today and I immediately thought of you. Why, oh why, when we're so close to the opportunity of doing a bespoke trade deal with the US, precisely the kind of thing we probably should have done, by the way, years ago, after we Brexited, why would Sir Keir Starmer's regime choose to do a deal with Brussels, a Brussels that Donald Trump detests so much? He calls them a foe created to rape and pillage the USA. Why go Brussels at this point?
Well, you have to understand the mindset of Keir Starmer and people like him. For him, it's not a matter of what's practical in the common sense benefit of the United Kingdom. It is about putting his ideology first. And we've seen this repeatedly with the European Union and the way that it prosecutes its move towards ever greater union. And even though we're outside it, you know, Keir Starmer would like to be in it. And you might recall, Martin, that in September 2023 in Montreal, Keir Starmer thought he was off the cameras, but the cameras were still rolling. And he said that if I were ever to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I will align us so closely with the European Union that you won't be able to tell the difference about, you know, whether we're members or not. And this is precisely what he's doing. But of course, he's doing it from a position that's even weaker than if we were in the EU, because we have no representation in the EU at the moment. And of course, it makes very challenging, I think prohibits a trade deal with the United States. But more significantly, in my mind, it takes another massive damaging hammer blow to the British democracy, because in order for us to align ourselves on food standards and sanitary and phytosanitary standards with the European Union, we have to accept the supremacy of the European Court of Justice. So again, we find a foreign court adjudicating on domestic matters in the United Kingdom as to whether or not, for example, we're adhering to their standards. This is all about Keir Starmer and people like him effectively being Europhiles first and putting this country to the coming second, to the detriment of this country. It is, and I'm coming to it because Christopher Hope will start shaking his head, it is basically because the Prime Minister is a Europhile and he's anti-British. The whole thing, he's shaking his head on cue. The whole thing about the European project, at the heart of the European project, and people need to understand this, is to do away with nation states and to empower Brussels.
This video is sponsored by Saily. Saily is a brand new eSIM service app. What it does is get you a local SIM card that you can use when you're traveling, so you don't have to pay those crazy roaming fees just to send a text back home. They've got eSIM plans in over 160 countries and 8 regions, so pretty much wherever you're going, they'll be able to make sure you're connected. So how does it work? Well, all you've got to do is hit our link in the description to download the app. It will work on iOS or Android. Buy a plan, you can choose the best time frame for you, and then just install the eSIM on your phone. When you land at your holiday destination, you can activate your plan instantly. Saily eSIMs only ever have to be installed once, so when you go on your next trip, you just buy a plan for a new country, turn that eSIM back on, and just like that, you could be watching the GB News YouTube channel. You can be connected anywhere you go, and you don't have to deal with patchy Wi-Fi in your hotels. So get sorted for your next trip by downloading Saily using the link in the description below, and if you use our code NEWS at checkout, you'll get an exclusive 15% discount on us.
And if your aim is to do away with nation states, and we see it practically through the Schengen zone, you were talking about illegal migration earlier, if you do away with nation states, the only way to describe heads of those states is as being anti the states of which they are head.
Why are you saying that?
Otherwise,
people in France are in the EU are less French than we are British. We're outside the European Union. That's what you're saying.
I would say that on paper we're outside the EU. I think actually we talk about the Brexit betrayal. The Brexit betrayal was the withdrawal agreement in 2019 when we decided to leave Northern Ireland behind. And paradoxically, one of the issues that becomes less problematic as a result of this tilt towards Brussels is the Irish Sea border, because one of the biggest problems between Northern Ireland and Great Britain now is the withdrawal agreement created a border for sanitary and phytosanitary items. But essentially, absolutely right, Chris. People in Europe are heading rapidly away from actually having nation states. France, Germany, Netherlands, Poland, they're all going to become one morass of nothingness if Brussels gets its way.
But
Nigel, let's get you in.
All that's happening here is that this is a way of getting rid of border checks which have crippled British business.
No, it's not.
Well, yes, it is.
It's not. That may be one consequence of it. What it is adopting...
Well, that's the reason for doing it, to get that consequence.
It is adopting European Union standards dictated to us by Brussels and adjudicated by a foreign court. That is anti-democratic. It's also anti what is good for this country.
What it means is, as we discovered with Northern Ireland, that you actually had shipments of cream crackers having to be signed off by a vet because of their tiny dairy content.
Yeah, so
these are the kind of silly rules
Nigel,
once we'd left Europe that we need to get rid of.
The way to get rid of that silly rule is to tear up the withdrawal agreement, tear up the Northern Ireland Protocol, and bring Northern Ireland into the union with Great Britain that creates the United Kingdom.
And then what do you do with the Irish border and
the Irish border
and the Good Friday Agreement and peace in Ireland?
Oh my goodness! The Irish border goes where the wretched Good Friday Agreement recognises it to be, which is on the island of Ireland, separating Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. People keep saying this, and it's a complete fallacy. The whole point about the Good Friday Agreement was that the Republic of Ireland recognised the existence of Northern Ireland and gave up its claim to it. It thereby recognised the border. And the border...
But that was pre-Brexit.
The border was weaponised with a threat of violence by Leo Varadkar in a summit in 2018 in order to get his way to put the Irish Sea border where it's now gone. And we have put a border down the middle of our own country in order to placate a threat of terrorism from the Republic of Ireland. That's how far this country has fallen.
The whole point was to keep the Irish border open, which is what it had been before Brexit.
There was absolutely... There was never a need to close that border. Customs checks could have taken place away from the border, Simon Coveney, who was the Foreign Secretary of the Republic of Ireland then, said, I don't care if you have border checks in Ballymena, that won't be good enough for me.
Gentlemen.
This is all about ideology, it's not about the United Kingdom, it's not about British interests, and it's certainly not about the British people.
Gentlemen, let's get back to this trade deal. In fact, no, let's move on to this other story, actually. The story, you overheard us talk about this notion of a one-in, one-out deal from the French. They'll take an illegal immigrant back if we take one legally. Ben Habib, what's your take on the notion of one in, one out?
Well, what it is, a number of things. It's basically a reinstitution of a variation of the Dublin Agreement, which you might recall turned on these kinds of things. And I think the sum total of all the net sum total of illegal migrants that were returned by the United Kingdom over the 5 or 6 years of the Dublin Agreement before we left the EU was about 380 people. It doesn't protect your border. The other thing it does is effectively legalise illegal migration. Because when France sends you someone and says, well, here's someone because you've sent us someone, that someone has the right to be in the UK. So you're legalising illegal migration. There's only one solution to illegal migration across the Channel, and that is for our borders to be enforced physically at the point at which these dinghies seek to enter our waters. Unless and until the British government recognises that border enforcement takes place at the border, unless and until they recognise that we do not have borders until we've done that, we will cease again. This is an attack on nation states. We will continue to be assaulted by illegal migrants and have a denudement of our sovereignty.
I don't think Ben Habib's a fan.
But the point about this ban is it is a start. It's the UK and France negotiating. France normally hide behind the European Union. They're not now. It's a start towards some form of returns agreement.
But the start will be the finish. Once they've done this, they'll say, well, that's the problem solved. You send us your illegal migrants, we'll send you ours, everything's settled, everyone's legal. And it'll propagate illegal migration.
It could actually act as a deterrent for crossing the Channel.
The best deterrent is to have the Royal Navy or Border Force do its job. Well, that is the best deterrent. The second best deterrent...
Rather than the idea of overturning boats and drowning people in the English Channel...
No, not at all.
Let's think of something that works a bit better.
Absolute garbage. The Belgians institute a rapid response force in their own waters, intercepting dinghies that have left Belgium, and they've reduced the launching of illegal migrants by 92% over 5 years. Physical interference at the point of the border, which is what borders are all about, actually works.
Yeah, I'm not against any of that. I mean, you were talking about in the English Channel by sending the Navy in, and that would end up collapsing.
No, I've just explained it won't.
Okay. Well, the point I'm making about this particular scheme is if you've got people who have not a right, but have family in Britain, can come here, that would stop them crossing the Channel.
All right, gentlemen. Chris, I think you've got a quick question.
While we've got you, Ben, there's talk last week about a new party called the Integrity Party. You're setting up yourself. What's the plan? Is this going to take on support from Reform UK, people who don't like Nigel Farage? You're going to try and attract Rupert Lowe to join it?
So, we had a deal we wouldn't talk about the Integrity Party, but let's talk about it. Integrity Party is a party set up by two first-class gentlemen, Christian Russell and Richard Shaw, the latter one of whom was a Reform candidate and was unceremoniously turfed out of Reform like so many other people, myself included. In some respects, I stepped down as deputy leader. This party is in its infancy. I've just taken it over. It's going to have a new constitution put in place, and it will be launching formally in the next couple of months.
Good. And where will it sit in politics? To the right of Reform? If you can even say that? It's
difficult not to be to the right of Reform because Nigel is busy rushing to the left-hand side of politics.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Ben Habib, excellent stuff. Chris Hope, Nigel Nelson, a great ding-dong there. Thank you very much. Let's move swiftly.